Research shows that 13.8% people around the world have some kind of mental illness or the other. That is 1 in 8 people on Earth. And majority of what they find is that most of those problems are more linked towards depression and anxiety. Have you ever wondered what is the main cause of that depression, anxiety, and that mental problem? Why is it become so much more heightened in society today? And what does biology have to do with this? How does your body and your mind, your emotions, how do they all interact with each other to find yourself in this state? And how can you leverage that information to get yourself out of that state if you're experiencing one of these illnesses? Today, here with me is Daniel, and we are gonna discuss with you exactly how the steps that you can use your body's innate healing power to deal with whatever mental illness or symptoms that you may have. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Proverbial Mind Podcast. It is your host again, Samuel, and joining me today is Daniel, an expert in cell biology. A lot of the stuff, very technical things that we're going to discuss today about your body and your emotions, your mind, and how they all join together to help your body functions. And so, Daniel, could you give us a brief introduction about yourself?
Samuel, hey man, thanks. Great to be here. Quick intro about myself. I was born in former Yugoslavia, and that country doesn't exist anymore. So I had a rapid change in a worldview about what's really important on our time here on planet Earth. And for me, it's been about the human being. I'm obsessed about what are we? We feel like aliens to this planet, but we are the consciousness coming forward for this planet. And so I'm here to talk a little bit about the technical stuff. I'll try to keep it high level, so everyone can relate, not
Right.
get lost too in the weeds. But absolutely, I spent over a decade really going through the biology that people share today around the world, that is the genetics, the proteins, the metabolites, these big databases that have given massive data. It doesn't really work in biology when you want to have massive data because they're not all equal.
Right.
You have a growth factor next to a chaperone protein next to some, like they don't have the same weight. So when one of them is a little bit out of range, who cares? When another of them is a little bit out of range, you're, oh my God, that's massive because you know the consequences that happen downstream. And I would love it if we knew more, but for the vast majority of what we found out as biologists is that we don't know really what's going on because you might go get 5 measurements, in your blood when you go see a doctor, but there's thousands.
Mm.
So when you start seeing two, three, 400 at a time, all of a sudden it gives you a different view of really what is the body trying to do? What are
Right.
these, what's the cholesterol doing? What's the kidney markers and this and that. And so, we know a fraction of of something we're confident with to move on and action on. But the era is changing with the amount of information, with the amount of work, with the amount of people that are stepping forward to participate in understanding who they are.
Right.
By virtue, we learn what's possible.
Right. That is awesome overview of what Daniel has been into the past couple years. And we are going to be unpacking some of those gradually in an applicable and quite understandable manner for the average audience, for you to understand what your body is actually doing at a time and a certain moment. What are you experiencing? And this brings me into anxiety, Daniel. Anxiety is something that has been observed a lot in society. And I feel like more than 13% of the world population actually faces anxiety. If you're connected on the internet, I feel like the internet is one of the most accelerated ways that people get anxiety nowadays with the different kind of news, different social trends and social economics of people trying to be like someone else or comparing themselves. I've seen a lot of trends of people really basing all their sense of what and purpose and sense of significance based on social media likes and followers and all that stuff. And these are some self-destructive behaviors, in my opinion, that can really threaten your peace because you really cannot control what happens out there. Only thing you can control is the way you see it, the way you observe it, and the way you respond to it. So, Daniel, let's go into anxiety. How does the body operate? What is happening when you're going through anxiety? Where does it stem from? How does it start? How does it start? And how can Proverbial mind audiences learn these terminologies and then practically observe it in their own body, thus giving them the capabilities to address it and prevent it in the future? Because when you know the base, the root, you can kill the problem from the root, not cutting down the branches. So let's get into that.
Yeah, so what's the big idea to connect it to right away with the idea of anxiety?
Mm.
We all experience it.
Right,
And it's not one that is something to shy away from, it's one to recognize.
right.
Now, there is debilitating anxiety where it simply cripples you and you can't act. But
Mhm,
let's just address the one in which, hey, we're experiencing anxiety. So it's tied to very simple, your identity.
mhm.
So let's take a very simple example. I send a kid into a store, a very expensive store, and I
Right.
don't give him enough money to buy anything in there. But I tell him, hey, go get yourself a shirt.
Mm.
So he gets in there and he's like, well, I can't afford anything. Or they're going to look at me. They're going to talk to me. They're going to say, hey, get out of the store.
Right.
And all of a sudden, there's tons of anxiety that comes up about being in the wrong place because he doesn't have enough money to spend in the store. And so there's no confidence.
Mhm,
And the anxiety there is telling them to act in a certain accordance. Hey, get out of here. Hey, this is not your place. Hey, you're going to be judged. You're
mhm.
not going to get attacked, but you're going to get emotionally shunned. You're going to be attacked in ways in which we don't necessarily like from our nervous system because we're social creatures.
Fear of what would happen.
Fear of what will happen, the unknown, the uncertainty, the
Mhm,
doubt. Those are absolutely the cascading circumstances that really trigger or heighten the anxiety. But now, let's say I go to the kid and I give him, say, hey, here's the rock star of platinum credit cards.
Right.
You have an unlimited amount. You can go buy that entire store. Don't, but just go buy yourself, a pair of shoes, a shirt, some pants. The difference with an individual with the fact that they can come in with the exact same tethered clothing on or whatever else that they had, that makes no difference. All of a sudden they're going to come with unbelievable confidence because
Right.
they have now an identity of, hey, I'm really well off. So your identity coming to the table really makes it so that, well, let's take another example. Oh, I'm a really good father. Oh, I'm there for my kids. I'm there all the time. Or I'm a really good mother. Everything I do for my family first. Even if those are complete lies,
Mhm.
even if the mother or father aren't very good, maybe they're very self-absorbed and selfish. If that's the identity they're putting forward, they're gonna attract what I would say is a certain level of when that isn't being experienced, they'll get upset. They'll have anxiety because this is their identity. So if we know that, if we know, hey, but is what's our identity? The thing is that we take on identity throughout the day depending on who we interact with. I interact with a younger child, I might be a mentor. I interact with an older gentleman, I still might be a mentor. But I interact with someone my age, there's no chance I'm mentor. Right?
Right.
That person doesn't want me there in their life. They're doing their own thing. They're on their own portion of their life where they have to develop a self, autonomy. So, we come to a day-to-day basis of taking on roles for one another. You might be a doctor to some, but maybe when you have to see another doctor, you have to be a patient.
Mhm.
So there's this constant flip and something that is extremely healthy for an individual, right? When you're going to bed, to relinquish all your identities. Every single one. Hey, I'm no longer a firefighter, I'm no longer a teacher, I'm no longer a lawyer, I'm no longer a banker, I'm no longer a husband, I'm no longer a wife, I'm no longer a mother. Let all of those go. Don't worry, you'll pick them right up as soon as you wake up. Other people will make sure you do. But when you do that, it makes it easier for the identities to stick to you in the waking state that have more of a aligned sense of purpose, aligned sense of action that will come from you from those identities. And so we'll shed that anxiety. And often we get tangled in relationships that aren't serving us. And it doesn't have to be that, hey, I have to run away from this person. It's sometimes you just don't want to be near a state of mind. Now, this is something I think is very easy to say. It's very difficult to convey the information because maybe we're around certain individuals that kind of saw us a certain light for the majority of our lives. Maybe they saw us as, irrational or very emotional, but we've grown up from that. Now, every time we interact with this person, they haven't yet seen or observed the person we've grown into, the challenges that we faced, right? Because you say, hey, God, I want to be wise. Then he's like, here's failure. Get wise. Hey, I
Right.
want to get strong. Here's stuff you have to battle in order to get strong. So as we go through our journey, as we go through, the hero's journey of becoming more competent in our skin, there is states of mind that we not necessarily need to engage with anymore. And it's not that you have to push a person out of your life, but know that, hey, this isn't serving me right now. They're reaffirming something that I'm not,
Mhm.
and it's making me uncomfortable. It's causing I have to play defense. I don't want to play defense anymore. I don't want to play this game. I want to walk off the field. And you always have the option to do that. And your language is the carrier. Your language helps put that across. And if it's a relationship in which is super close and whatnot, then it's a time for, sharing not that, hey, you're rude, right? Emotionally intelligent people don't say, hey, you're rude. They'll say, hey, I feel like I'm being misrepresented.
Right.
And that gives a lot of, I would say, credence for the other individual to be like, oh, okay, I did, what did I miss? You know, once we say that you this, you that, we start triggering defense
Defense
systems.
system. Yeah.
That's right. That's
You
right.
don't want
So
to feel attacked.
exactly. So that would be my nutshell for anxiety is to really tie it first and foremost to the big pictures. Now, there's going to be a lot more cascadings, issues that cause us to have the anxiety. They could be related, and you said it. The biggest one outside of that in terms of emotion is it's fear that
Right.
ends up really guiding a vast majority of our actions. Now, it's not about, hey, I don't have fear in my life. It's that we don't let fear rule over us. It's just like
Right.
a cloud. Let it pass over and we continue on with our day, knowing that there is something in which my body is bringing to, or my mind is, and my body is bringing to the forefront, to the awareness to say, deal with this. Keep caution of this. Don't allow this to come too close. And often that comes from a place of not understanding the unknown. Once the understanding comes, there's easier time to have acceptance of how you're going to deal with it. And so that's a bit of a Buddhist philosophy with, overcoming suffering,
Yes.
overcoming troubles is encouraging yourself to understand the scenario in order to be able to get to a point to be able to name it, to have that realization. And that cycle is the way in which you get yourself out of, the states of suffering and move
Right.
up. Yeah. So
Something I
that
got from that is the anxiety most times is fueled by your interaction sometimes with people. And then it triggers a certain part of you that makes you feel like you're misrepresented, that doesn't align with your belief of yourself. And then you begin to question yourself. You begin to question your confidence in yourself or what you believe. And to my understanding, that leads to lack of control because now it feels like I don't have control over the situation anymore. It's not going the way I wanted it to be. And based on the human psychology and the way humans like to operate, they always want to be in control. And so when they encounter a situation that they are not prepared for, or they feel like they're not in control, it switch that flight response mode or fright response mode, and you're like, hey, what's going on here? And the aspect of trying to figure something out, you go into anxiousness and then the fear of what is going to happen now? All of that just rounds on and rounds on and rounds on. But the moment you are able to understand that, okay, first of all, this ain't in my control. The present perspective of me does not mean that's who I am. and you learn to understand yourself better. You know yourself, you know your do's and don'ts. And if somebody is probably crossing the line, you find a more emotional, intelligent way to say, hey, like you said, you're not being representing me well, or if it is for you to cut the cycle, you cut it. But understanding the fact that you're not going to be able to be in control of everything that you see. And 99% of the time, the fault of why people act the way they act. Everything is based off of perspective. And the fact that someone sees you that way does not mean they see you that way. In fact, someone told me something recently that I found to be very mind-blowing. The eyes is just a lens to capture images. But what really sees is your mind, it's your brain, because everything you picture out there is just like a bunch of images, just like AI looking at data. It takes it into his head and then it makes meaning of it. Boom. That is how it works. And so most times what people see is actually not what there is. It's just your own interpretation of what it is. It's not even fact.
Oh, that's spot on. The world isn't happening outside of you. It's
Right.
rather a representation of what's happening inside of you.
Right.
So, there's this idea in biology.
Mm.
If you think about you're controlling a drone and that drone sees whatever, you're overviewing some traffic or a jungle or whatever. So
Right.
you get excited about seeing something through the drone. The drone doesn't really know. It's just seeing things.
Right.
It's relaying that information to you. So you're the interface of,
Right.
call it, meaning. There's the the interface of the drone capturing the image and then bringing it back to you, which is the meaning.
Right.
So there's quite the idea that you here as a human being are just like the drone for your real self or a greater version of yourself, in which is come to be able to say, hey, I don't want to just see images like the drone does. I want to experience
Right.
emotions. I want to experience feeling. I want to see what gravity is like. I want to see what having other people around
Mm.
coming up, brushing up, pushing up against me. What is that like?
Right.
Because I already have the lens of eternity. I don't get to experience that. I don't get to feel that. And so we bring out meaning from the drone and something else, maybe bringing out meaning through our lives and how we go and interact and live. And this seems to be, to me, a very alluring idea in biology because there is words that have been left through different cultures. Now we say the word incarnation,
Mm.
right? We say the word animal or animation. So that has the same root, anima, and
Right.
then karna. These words, the idea of animation, to bring something to life, it's got to give something static what seems like it has motion. And so our ancient, call it, ancestors had this notion that there's a life force that's moving through us, prana from India. So this our language also still holds that weight. And very much so this movement, this idea of the greater sense of being is, I think, really important because as we separate further and further from it, or as we feel more and more like we're stuck within our skin, these feelings of I have to control everything come about.
Right.
And the reality is the only thing that you get to control from this little drone, the human being, is your reactions to what's happening, everything else,
Mm.
what you perceive to be outside of you. But in reality, it's not outside of you because it's a point of view. And I think that's a very important thing to capture here in terms of also what escalates your anxiety.
Mm.
You might see a rope on the ground and think it's a snake, right?
Right.
There wasn't even a snake. It was just a perspective.
Effective. Right.
And your whole physiology changed. So the way we perceive the world completely dictates how our genome is expressed. What are we going to produce in order to respond to life? And that response, that ability to say, even though there's nothing there that's of an issue, our ability to create these things, this generation of feelings and emotions, these different states, is what I'd say is what most cultures refer to as the soul. It's not like we have to point at it anatomically. Rather, we observe it. We observe the different states in which you can shift and move into without anyone else's intervention. You did it all on your own.
Right.
It was completely a point of perspective. And so I'll share this with you in terms of an idea of really what the human being is, in terms of an analogy, is the best way to consider what you are. when you say I am, is a whirlpool. So you walk by the whirlpool and you say, well, there it is. There's a structure. I see it, and every day I walk by it, it's there. However, if you were ever to say, well, let me capture and look at the whirlpool, you'd be capturing little different bits of water every single time. If you were to diet and put little different indicators, it would be within a couple seconds a completely new bit of water, but yet there's
Right.
structure. And so for the human being, it takes a longer than, a couple seconds to swish out and move all of the call it contents. It takes sometimes a year, three, five, seven. But around seven, the vast majority of what you are has completely shifted and changed. And so what is it that stays there in terms of a interface is the idea of the same as the whirlpool. It's not stagnant. It's not permanent, and it's not what we would say physical. We have this idea of, oh, it's physical, it's something I interact with. But in reality, because everything is operating within our mind, we are perceiving it. And who knows how much we're not perceiving in
Right.
terms of what's there. We know through science and through technology, heck, there's more of a spectrum that we can interact with that we just don't see with our eyes. We might detect it with our skin, but we don't know it's around. And so that's I think an idea worth exploring in terms of what is the human being, right? What is it that really is going on? And if you know this, does it help you in day to day? And I would say very much so it does, because it relinquishes a lot of the anxiety. It brings about a lot of confidence when you
Right.
feel like you have your place in the world.
Right. That's exactly right. And that ties back to identity. You just know who you are and nothing shakes you anymore based off no matter what you've experienced. You just know who you are. And there's a knowledge of knowing who you are and grounded in that belief that nothing just freaks you out, nothing shakes you because you understand that, like you said, that water, it changes. There are different people, different purposes, different mission on earth, and you're just one unique piece of the coin, you know. You're never meant to fit in or whatever, or synchronize like the world might portray it. No. In fact, the ones that stand out the most are the ones that think and get to see things that the majority of the populations don't see. So don't be anxious. Be weird, do whatever, deal with it. It's part of life. And so that links us into depression. You know, how then does depression stem from all this? Definitely anxiety has to do with it. And I feel like it's a prolonged state of anxiety, and then you start feeling this sense of hopelessness, and then depression.
Yeah, so I mean a little different, and I know I kind of swept the call it the I would say the dysfunctional or the disease associated anxiety where,
Mhm.
hey, what if there is, call it the chemical, misalignment sort of idea and
Right.
theory. So in depression, let's start with that one because that one's rather simple to kind of deal with
Mhm.
in terms of explaining it on a concept, on a hey, what's going on here?
Right.
And depression can be, hey, I'm lacking a specific nutrient or mineral. And
Mhm.
if I replenish it, I will no longer be depressed. And so, what's one of the ones that's top of the food chain for depression is magnesium.
Mhm.
So, about 500 milligrams daily has, now numerous times through publications been replicated to get people out of states of depression. So, we can have a what I would say metabolically linked depression where we've just lived our lives constantly and this is already in the other side of the aspects of what's going on in this person's life to get them in deep rest, right? We say depressed,
Mhm.
but they are seeking, or what they're doing actively is trying to rest
Mhm.
in a deep, profound sense. And there is often a disconnection in life that's getting a person to be in a state of I'm quite low, I'm quite lethargic, I'm quite unmotivated. And it's not restricted to human beings. So orangutans, primates, chimpanzees,
Mhm.
they experience depression because when things are good, it's life flourishes and those memories they might stick around, but they're not as imperative for your survival as the negative experiences.
Right.
You see people say, "Oh, let that go." And yes, of course, you do have to have the ability to allow things to move through you. But there's a reason why, as a human being, you have a memory.
Hmm.
It's because those, call it negative states, times, they can shape you into a quite profound and strong individual, resilient individual, compassionate individual. And so depression is a part of a mechanism to really make it that the difficult parts in life are learned from. And I'll switch it a little bit to the idea of addiction,
Hmm.
where in the 80s, it's a little bit unfortunate the way that society and culture has taken this idea of addiction because they've kept propagating it as we're going to blame the substance.
Hmm.
We're not going to actually address anything else. We're going to call alcohol or drugs or whatever, lottery tickets. We're going to call that the problem. But that isn't the problem. That's the solution, right? The problem is the person doesn't like their life. The person doesn't like themselves. They don't like their
Hmm.
identity. They don't like the portion that they've allowed themselves to get to. And so when you put a bunch of rats in a cage, if they're alone and you give them drug water, they'll kill themselves. If you put them together, where they have buddies, they have, there's males and females, they got tubes to run through and hide and chase each other. Not a single one of them overdoses. None of them touch the drug water. And so addiction really is I'm not bonding with the things that I would like to bond with.
Bond with, yeah.
Hey, I came to planet Earth and I want to make these connections. I want to have people in my life. I want to have these ventures that I pursue. I want to have these hobbies I entertain. And when we don't participate in those things, we start falling to a point where our emotional state depresses, our mental state depresses.
Hmm.
And it's there as an intended catalyst to realign you to what you want to be doing. But we live in very, I would say, weird times
Right.
where so much of our biology is taken care of, the food, the shelter, we get electricity, we have these things, but we don't necessarily get the emotional components that a human being needs to
Need
feel like
function like a
they.
normal person.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, whatever normal is, but absolutely. So it could be, as a kid, you didn't get the love that you needed. Maybe you were a very bright kid or a very exuberant kid or a very outgoing individual, and each time that you put your best foot forward, they were thwarted. You were neglected, or you were shunned, or you were simply told to, hey, you're misbehaving, get in line by individuals that themselves didn't really have the best support to be able to nurture their emotions. And so we learn a sense of avoidance
Hmm.
for conflict. We learn almost a state of helplessness, which then translates into later in life when challenges that you can deal with become almost insurmountable. And with that comes this emotion of depression as there is the subconscious or the greater version of you that has an idea, right? This is why I say it's very difficult for science to come in and say, none of this exists. Remember, science never tells you that something doesn't exist. They can just make sure it doesn't falsify what there is,
Right.
right? So you need evidence in order to be able to make conclusions. And so there's clearly an aspect of a human being in which you're tied to set ways of developing. You require this attention from both male and female
Hmm.
counterparts when you're a child. And depending on the type of child, you might gravitate very much so more towards desiring male influence or
Hmm.
desiring female influence. And when you're seeking that attention because you're looking to emulate, you're looking to learn, you're looking to
Right.
connect, when that's constantly being thwarted as a child, then it's very difficult when you come later in life because that's your hardwiring. But even still, what does that tell us? That the fact that the hardwiring is not functioning properly, it's problematic, it's destructive, it's going down towards it's not going to exist unless it comes back to some type of alignment.
Right.
And this alignment that we call this, hey, this is the way life can happen, is something very phenomenal because it's nature's intelligence. You can call it source intelligence. You can give any kind of name you like to it. But this is what science is all about. It's about studying this objective truth that's present in front of us. We would like to know why is it that out of all the millions and possible manifestations that life can happen, it has to fall in this almost golden path that the person needs these fundamental exchanges between another. It needs to bond in order to be able to progress and move forward. And it's funny because so many people think like, oh, it's about me. I can do it without other people, not realizing that the majority of your neurology, of your biology, so your brain is set up to interact with human beings more so than anything else in our planet. We have portions in our brain. One is called, for example, the fusiform face gyrus. And all it does is recognize faces. It
Mm.
doesn't recognize animals. It's just to recognize other human faces. Because for us, it's imperative socially when we see someone that we know who that is. Oh, it's a king. Oh, it's a murderer. Oh, it's the guy that, it's the joker, it's the jester. We have such an importance of recognizing who we're speaking to because we have such important bonds that we set for ourselves socially. And, you know, everything you do, yes, it's out of a volition, but you're a representation of what's around you,
And
right? This is the,
it's so powerful that you said that. Just sorry. I
yeah,
noticed too that in correlation to what you're talking about, it is mostly in the winter time. That is when that tendencies rises the most. Because look at the winter time, the weather is cloudy and everything is so down, and people barely ever go outside because it's cold and there's no human interactions, and people tend to start abusing substances the more, and doing things that would rather not do if, you're able to interact with people and stuff. And growing old as a kid too, I noticed this thing. Being more an engineering aspect and always being in science classes, back then many years ago, you barely ever find women in those areas, except when you go to like classes that have to do with biology sciences and all the physics that has to do with the study of human being, which is where more majority of the females tend to gravitate towards. I noticed that in a class where there is only male, it's usually different compared to when there is male and female in there. There is a way the energy in the room changes. There is a livelihood that comes into that class. It becomes more enjoyable, it becomes more interesting, it becomes phenomenally better. And I noticed the same thing too for women. In a class where there is just only female, there's this kind of like down energy and all that kind of stuff, maybe negative energy and all this kind of stuff. But then when there are males, even if it's just a single male or two male in between a bunch of female, or just single female or two female and a bunch of males, it makes phenomenal amount of differences. And I realized this at a very young age then in high school. And that was part of what kickstarted my study of human beings. I'm like, why is it like that? You know?
yeah, that's a very, very interesting observation and fascinating. I mean, I would link it back to the Hermetic principles, where one of the principles of manifestation of how this universe grows is the idea of gender, right? The male
Right,
and the female. And when, those two poles come together, it's like magnets. If you've ever played with magnets, they
right,
just stick, they magnetize to one
right.
another. And that's the two poles, the male and the female. The chemistry that set up the biology
Mm.
is absolutely there to be able to shift our behavior and also a part of our purpose to why we exist. We're seeking that mate. We're fighting for a mate. It's fun in the chase. It's this game of hide and seek in such a way.
Right,
It's seeing yourself in another person.
right.
And I do think there's something very spiritually sound
Mm,
in finding a partner and growing
mm.
with another individual. And I see that as a learning of the flesh, a learning of what we are in terms of a human being, because we have to now constantly put up with each other's shit,
Right,
right?
right.
Like we're not, I would say, this pristine,
Mhm.
perfect creature. I would say we are perfect, right? That's 70 trillion cells cooperating with amazing unison. So it's quite perfect. I
Right,
would say, you're, an individual that can understand what we're saying, you're perfect. But on a behavioral sense and a hey outcomes and all that stuff, we 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 have to learn not only of the other person, but we have to learn about ourselves on how to communicate. What
right.
is it that gets us excited? So, I mean, absolutely that the the opposite sex is going to be always the invigorating one. It changes our dynamics. But you also mentioned sunlight, and we are absolutely powered by the sun. It's not just vitamin D that, hey, we produce. It is a whole sweep of metabolites
Mm.
that changes within our blood chemistry, so much so that being exposed to sunlight changes the way you digest food. So if you're not exposed to sunlight and you start eating very fatty food, you're going to store that fat very quickly. But if you're exposed to sunlight, you won't necessarily store as much of that fat. And so there's something very simple now. Now that's the science. That's simply, hey, I'm telling you what data we've pulled out. Now I'll connect some story to that science where it seems very plausible that when it's a sunny day, we want our metabolism to function at just a little higher peak because, hey, go out and do stuff. Yeah, it's a nice sunny day. Go out and hunt, go out and explore. What can you
Right.
find? Hey, look, you discovered metals. You're going to do something with metals. Hey, hey, there's clay. What are you going to do with the clay? So the sun changes and interacts with our metabolism to be in a more active metabolic state. Whereas when there's no sun, hey, you might want to rest. Maybe take it easy. Make
Hmm.
sure you have enough energy reserves to hold out. Who knows when the sun's going to come back?
Right.
So there does seem to be quite a profound connection with the sun. No matter where you go on the planet, you're going to experience jet lag. Hey,
Yep.
I went from one. So that is your biology tuning back towards the sun. The sun is going to set how the enzymes in your body turn on in the 24-hour cycle. And it's interesting, no matter where you go, you're going to try and readjust that cycle as best you can. And so the circadian cycle is very a lot more complicated than I think what most people understand it to be. For some reason, when I mention it to people, they're like, "Oh yeah, 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 sleeping, eating, all that very simple." No, it turns out that every organ has a way to try and recalibrate and come back towards its connection with the sun. And they're called clock genes. And so your liver has clock genes, your kidneys have clock genes, your stomach has clock genes, your spleen's got clock genes. So when we sometimes think about hair systems going haywire and out of alignment, and us coming back towards the sun, sitting and exposed to sun, fasting, doing things that allow rest, we call it, depression, but just allowing ourselves rest, allows for those clocks to recalibrate to a proper time because you don't want them functioning out of sync. You
Right.
don't want the stomach working, after the liver. The stomach's got to work first, then the liver, then your intestine. There's a sequence to it. So this is a part of, our existence here, like our mind, your mental state of what it can create, of how you're going to experience what's in front of you, how you will perceive the world is very much so in tune with the sun, right? There's yeah, the idea of hiding from it, like, yes, of course, you have to approach it as one of the most powerful things in existence. It's going to radiate energy endlessly at you. So if you've been hiding from it for a very long time, you got to do slow exposures. Same with cold exposure, the same with anything. Heck, you want to go lift weights, you got to build up your strength. So the same idea with the sun, you got to build up your capacity to absorb that energy. And
Right.
once you do, you'll realize how it revitalizes you.
That is very, very, very powerful, amazing concept. And it gave me a much more broader understanding of how the sun actually affect. I mean, I know the result, I know what it does, how it just you wake up in the morning, you open your blinds and you see that sun, you all smile, you just have this bright smile right away. Like it's a magical ripple effect, and you walk outside the sun for some time, you come back, you look at your face, you see that it has a different type of texture and tones. It smoothens out a little bit after some time. And then, when you sweat too, and maybe when the sweat dry off your faces, you might have a little bit of oiliness or stuff like that if you spend too much time, in the heat. But a good moderate amount of time outside in the sun every day, it definitely does enhance your skin texture. I've noticed it. This is not even based on study. I practicalize it myself to see the differences, and it is real. So guys, this is the key things that we're talking for you today about anxiety and depression. Now, to make all that connection, Anxiety most times usually stem from your identity. And when your identity is threatened, it threatens your confidence. Your identity is a sense of your belief of who you think you are, or what you think you are, or what are your values, or what do you whatever you believe about yourself. And you understand that what you see is not actually what there is sometimes, because your eyes only see things, but your mind and your brain is what interprets what you see. So basing your identity on whatever people, because humans have mirror neurons and we are constantly, like Daniel said, changing our identity or changing the perception of ourselves based on what we see or what people say to us or what people say about us and all that stuff. You have to get to a state in life where you determine who you are and who you want to be and what your values are. This, first of all, will give you a level of confidence such that when you go to places, you enter rooms or whatever, and people express certain expressions that might want to threaten you, you're not bothered because you understand that you are a unique human being. I mean, there are 8 billion people in this world. You have unique traits, all having unique purposes and missions here on this earth. You're never supposed to fit in. You're never supposed to be like everyone else. You're unique in the way you are. And that then boils down to the emotional intelligence and being able to interact with people, understanding people, and, regulating your emotions and other people's emotion and communicating in an effective and mature way. So all of this stuff helps to regulate your state of anxiety because it stems from fear, being out of control, and all of that kind of stuff, which really ties to identity and who you see yourself as. And then the depression aspect, we've talked about the importance of having that human interaction. Humans are social beings by nature. Your brain, your system, your biology, according to Daniels, is wired to interact with people, to interact, with your environment and all that kind of stuff. And when you're constantly in the face of being isolated and being, you're trying to rest every time, your body have to work in sync. So having the balance of all of those parameters of what requires your body to function properly is what really will get you out of that state of depression. So this is the time for you then to look at your routine, your social cycle, and what you do with your time and everything to balance your schedule in such a way that you allow your body to operate the way modern nature and the way God has created it to operate. And guys, that is it there on anxiety and depression, how you can use your understanding of the body's function and biology to solve these problems. So, Daniel, what is one key final thing that you would like to share with us as we round up the episode today?
Yeah, I would say take a look at your language.
Mm.
What are the words that you are saying? What are the repeating concepts? What are repeating ideas? The language helps us connect with reality.
Right,
And it is the notion by which you bring about change to your identity, your emotions that you eventually evoke. You see, the words might be inert
right.
initially, but eventually they tie to an emotion. And when that emotion is experienced, that's what you remember when you go to sleep at night.
Mm.
When you go to bed, your subconscious downloads your emotions that happen throughout the day. It doesn't download your intelligent jargon that you went through. And the sharper you become with your language, when you say words such as, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, these are concepts. These are ideas. We talked a little bit today about mind, about how far, what do you mean when you say mind? What do they mean when they say mind? When you go through this process to reevaluate your language, it gives you a set of confidence when you walk in to any single space because you have a bigger understanding of your identity of who you really are.
Right.
So the language, I think, is a part in which not only is it important for yourself, but it's also what you can bring to other individuals when
Visuals.
they're in different states of mind to either shift them, elevate them. And if you're looking for better connections in life, if you're looking for, hey, I want to connect, what should I be doing? Don't be the individual that simply plays a victim or pouts and sits in the corner. No, if you're delighted, if whatever delight nature, you will then be a delightful person. In the same ways that people that are interesting are people that are interested in the world, that are
Right,
interested in anything.
right.
Because if you're interested in something, I guarantee you someone else on planet Earth is too. And now get together and enjoy discovering more of it as, well, there seems to be endless amounts of it.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It's really great to have you here today and to share this wealth of wisdom and research you've done so far in the years. And I believe I get a lot of value from it, and I know our audience too are going to get a lot of value from it. So that is it, guys. Mind your words, know what you speak. And if you want to socialize, this lone wolf thing, I don't understand this idea of lone wolf. You're just gonna kill yourself, all right? It's okay to be socialized. It is good to have good time to yourself, but go out there to connect. You can be a lone wolf, but you also need to interact with people. You need to connect, and that's how you spread your network. All right, guys? So if you're here for the first time, do not forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification button and do not forget to share this video with your friends and family or whoever out there you would think might be able to gain valuable insight from this. And if you ever have any testimony or questions thereabout, maybe you can reach out to us at proverbialminds@gmail.com. And if you like the audio version of this podcast, you can also listen to us at Proverbial Minds on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can find us there. Otherwise, guys, until the next one, stay blessed and peace out.